Welcome to the White Knight Theater, Episode 25, The Man in the Luxury Suite. To protect Han Xiaohong and capture the murderer, Han Hao had meticulously arranged his personnel. However, a subtle habit of one plainclothes officer, unlike that of a real sanitation worker, was spotted by Luo Fei at first glance. He quickly analyzed the positions and the disguised attire of all the personnel. At this moment, with the plan about to commence, everyone's expression turned grave. Each person sensed the undercurrents beneath the calm facade. As the red BMW sped across the road, everyone's heart was in their throat. At 9:25, the red BMW arrived as scheduled in the parking lot in front of the DE building. The driver, who was none other than the Special Police Captain Xiong Yuan, parked the car between a white van and a black Santana. Both vehicles had semi-transparent privacy films on their windows, and police officers were already lying in wait inside. Xiong Yuan was the first to get out of the car. Subsequently, a man emerged from each of the van and the Santana, casually taking positions on either side of the BMW. Xiong Yuan walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for Han Xiaohong. "Ms. Han, we're here. You can get out now," Xiong Yuan said politely. "Okay," Han Xiaohong replied. She hesitated for a moment, but seeing the men on both sides of the car wearing black hats, she felt much more at ease and stepped out of the car. The man from the white van led the way towards the DE building. Xiong Yuan, with perfect manners, escorted Han Xiaohong, making them look like master and servant. After they had walked about 5 or 6 meters, the man from a Santana followed at a leisurely pace, forming a protective formation with the man in front around Xiong Yuan and Han Xiaohong. The other plainclothes officers on the square also entered their respective roles. 6 of them moved about seemingly aimlessly with different target directions, but they always maintained at least 2 people within 10 meters to the left and right of Han Xiaohong. The remaining 3 stayed in their original positions, which were crucial traffic points on the square. All the plainclothes officers' gazes became sharp, constantly scanning the square for any minor movement that might escape their notice. Their actions, in turn, were being closely observed by others. In the temporary command room on the 6th floor of the hotel, Han Hao, Luo Fei, and the others were holding their breath, monitoring the entire square. In just a few seconds, every step Han Xiaohong took seemed to weigh heavily on their hearts. Yin Jian, who had less composure, could almost hear his own heartbeat. The square remained bustling with people, with men and women of all ages passing through the protective circle formed by the plainclothes officers. They looked calm and peaceful, seemingly unaware of the tension in the air. Xiong Yuan adjusted his pace, constantly changing his relative position with Han Xiaohong to shield her from strangers who inadvertently entered the protective circle. The walk across the square was quick yet felt endless. Finally, Xiong Yuan escorted Han Xiaohong through the glass doors of the DE building. The plainclothes officer who had been walking ahead stopped in the lobby, waiting for the elevator. The elevator happened to arrive at the first floor at that moment. The security guard at the elevator door exchanged a glance with Xiong Yuan. He was one of Xiong Yuan's subordinates in the Special Police Force. Xiong Yuan let out a soft sigh of relief. According to the prearranged division of labor, the Special Police Force was in charge of security inside the DE building. It was reassuring to have his own people on the job. The most dangerous part of the journey had passed, and Xiong Yuan's tense mood finally relaxed. The expressions of the Special Task Force members in the monitoring room were varied. Yin Jian and Xiong Yuan both let out long sighs of relief, while Luo Fei continued to stare at the monitor, frowning and deep in thought. Mu Jianyun's gaze was fixed on Luo Fei, as if the man's every move was more concerning than Han Xiaohong's safety. Han Hao had been standing by the window the whole time. Now, turning around with a slightly downer mouth, he revealed a hint of disappointment. He brought the microphone to his lips and said, "I'm 001. Disperse and rest on site now. Be back at the original position for vigilance before 3 in the afternoon." Han Hao finished speaking, and Mu Jianyun finally interrupted Luo Fei's thoughts. "All right, Luo Fei, can you explain to us what you're thinking?" What would you do? What do you mean? Luo Fei asked. You've already put yourself in the murderer's shoes, haven't you? Mu Jianyun replied. I can read it in your eyes. Your gaze moved quickly just now, but rarely lingered on Han Xiaoong. So, you're not concerned about that woman's safety. You're looking for loopholes in the police arrangement. Mu Jianyun's words immediately drew the attention of everyone in the room, who all looked at Luo Fei in unison. Luo Fei looked at everyone calmly, and finally his gaze rested on Han Hao. However, this loophole seems not to exist, Luo Fei said. Captain Han, your arrangement is very tight, and you have a group of capable subordinates. If I were that murderer, I haven't thought a way to harm Han Xiaoong. Unless what? Unless the murderer is proficient in disguise and camouflage, then he might infiltrate the cordon and launch a surprise attack. Of course, he must also have the skills to defeat Captain Xiong in an instant. Even so, it would be impossible for him to escape after succeeding. More than 10 plainclothes officers would pounce on him from all directions in an instant. Where else could he go except to heaven or into the ground? So, I think about it again and again, and at most it would be a case of mutual destruction. Mutual destruction is still worth it, Luo Fei said. Officer Luo, if you have ever seen Captain Xiong's skills, you would know that the possibility of the net breaking is also non-existent, Han Hao said. As soon as Han Hao finished speaking, Mu Jianyun suddenly asked, Captain Han, is there a possibility of long-distance shooting, such as sniping? This possibility is extremely small. Since the founding of the People's Republic of China, there has never been such a murder case. This is not the United States, where machine guns are readily available. Even our provincial cities' criminal police force has never been equipped with them. That's true. Where can we get a sniper rifle? Someone else added. Ordinary firearms, if someone dares to pull them out in the square, would probably be tackled down by the surrounding plainclothes police before they even had time to aim, Luo Fei concluded. Meanwhile, in a luxurious suite, a man was watching the same death penalty notice post on his computer screen. Some netizens were enthusiastically speculating on the possible execution methods that Eumenides might use. Several people mentioned long-distance sniping. The man curled his lip into a cold smile. How absurd. Net names are almost becoming a synonym for ignorance, he muttered to himself. He got up and walked towards the bathroom. The mirror in the bathroom reflected his face, the face that was most familiar, yet most strange to him. He gently touched his cheek with his hand. The stubble on his cheeks had grown again. Even through the white gauze gloves, he could feel the prickly sensation. He picked up the razor and carefully shaved off all the stubble, flushing it all down the sink. Now he felt much more comfortable. He couldn't help but close his eyes and savor the smoothness of his chin. At that moment, a voice appeared in his ear again. What is the best weapon? A gun. Remember my words, never use a gun. When you get used to using a gun, you're not far from destruction. You also have to spend a lot of time finding a gun, and after finding it, you have to think about how to carry it and where to hide it after use. These problems can drag you down and make you a slave to the gun, leaving a lot of clues for the police to trace. Now I tell you, the best weapon is the most common and ordinary thing that you can get, carry freely, and discard at any time. In the days to come, weapons will become your closest companions. You must find a reliable one that will never betray you. The man opened his eyes and carefully disassembled the razor in his hand. The thin blade reflected a cold, sinister gleam in the mirror. Episode 26 of The Dark One, The Deceiver's Ruse. Han Xiaoong, escorted by Xiong Yuan and others, safely reached the most dangerous part of her journey inside, the Deyi building. As they walked past, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. In the temporary command room of the hotel, people began to speculate on the murderer's actions. Besides long-distance sniping, what other methods would the murderer use? And who was the man in the luxury suite? At 4 p.m. on October 23rd, close to the evening rush hour, the flow of people and vehicles in front of the Deyi building increased again. Some taxis and unlicensed cabs began to queue around the square, waiting for customers. Han Xiaohong spent the day in a state of unease. But fortunately, everything was peaceful with no unexpected incidents occurring. However, Xiong Yuan's mood did not lighten. He had anticipated that the likelihood of the criminal entering the building to commit murder was minimal. The most dangerous test was still the process of Han Xiaoong walking from the building's entrance to the parking lot. And that moment had finally arrived. The plainclothes officers of the criminal police team on the square had already taken their positions. They were well versed in the criminal's physical characteristics. So far, they had not found any suspicious individuals matching the description. In the monitoring room, Han Hao and others' nerves tightened again. If the murderer really intended to strike, the next few minutes were his last chance. In these few minutes, we had set up a tight net. If he dared to come, he would not escape us. If Han Xiaohong got in the BMW, then he would fail. It seemed he was not that formidable after all. Indeed, as long as Han Xiaohong safely got into the BMW, the police's trap would be closed, and the murderer would have no opportunity to strike. Of course, this also meant that the police would miss the best chance to capture the murderer. Han Hao stared intently at the square from the window, his eyes even revealing a hint of anticipation. Luo Fei, on the other hand, remained in the safe house, guarding the monitor. His brows furrowed deeper and deeper, as if he sensed something was amiss. At that moment, Xiong Yuan and Han Xiaohong had already left the building. Just as when they arrived, the plainclothes officers scattered around the square immediately formed a tight cordon around them. Everything was proceeding according to Han Hao's plan, but where was that person? Would he really jump into the trap? Luo Fei kept his eyes glued to the monitor. In the southeast corner of the square, a taxi was parked with someone seemingly moving in the passenger seat. This tiny change did not escape Luo Fei's notice. He raised an eyebrow. There's something off here. What is it? He asked. Look at the southeast corner. That red taxi has been parked for over 10 minutes. But if you look closely, there's someone in the passenger seat. It's not an empty car, Luo Fei explained. Han Hao followed Luo Fei's gesture and looked at the taxi. It was closer to the hotel, and he could vaguely see inside the car window. Indeed, it matched what Luo Fei had said. This was indeed an unusual situation. However, the taxi was still outside the cordon and within the range of the plainclothes officers on the square. I'm Tishonspionturok. Pay attention to the red taxi 10 meters to the southeast. The plainclothes officer watching the bicycles in the corner of the square should slightly shift his position, Han Hao instructed. The plainclothes officer pretending to be a bicycle attendant slightly turned his body, clearly increasing his vigilance towards the taxi. At the same time, the passenger door of the taxi opened and a man stepped out. Although Luo Fei and others were at a distance, they could still make out the man's basic appearance. He was small and thin, carrying an opaque plastic bag in his right hand. After getting out of the car, he glanced around and quickly spotted Han Xiaohong walking in the square. Immediately, he began to chase after her. As he walked, his left arm swung open, revealing a white bandage wrapped around his left hand. All the features matched the analysis they had done beforehand. Han Hao's heart raced. 005. Intercept the man getting out of the car, ordered. In fact, there was no need for Han Hao to give the command. The plainclothes officer pretending to be a bicycle attendant had already noticed something suspicious. Like a fierce tiger, he pounced towards the thin man. His previous aimless wandering around the car shed, with a sluggish gait, seemed like that of a sick person. But this pounce was extraordinarily fierce. The thin man had barely taken 2 steps when he was firmly tackled to the ground. He tried to get up and resist, but he was no match for the plainclothes officer and could only twist and struggle futilely under him. Han Hao was initially relieved, but then he felt a sense of confusion. This man was so frail. How could he possibly be the murderer who killed Inspector Zheng Haoming? The situation on the square changed dramatically in an instant. Just as the suspicious man was tackled, another man got out of a black, unlicensed cab to the west. He was also small and thin, carrying a plastic bag in his right hand, with his left hand wrapped in white bandages. And like the first man, he headed straight for Han Xiaoong after getting out of the car. Han Hao and Luo Fei's just slightly relaxed hearts tightened again at this sight. What surprised them even more was that among the many taxis waiting for customers around the square, more men with similar appearances emerged one after another. They were scattered in various corners, and there were more than 10 of them in total. Without exception, they all targeted Han Xiaohong and rushed towards her from different directions. The cordon set up by Han Hao's plainclothes officers on the square immediately demonstrated its powerful combat effectiveness. Each plainclothes officer intercepted the suspects in their respective directions. In the one-on-one confrontations, the police had an absolute advantage. The suspicious men were tackled one after another, with some quickly being handcuffed. Those who resisted experienced the fierce, close combat skills of the criminal police and couldn't even cry out in pain. However, Han Hao, who was overseeing the operation in the command room, couldn't bring himself to smile. The number of these suddenly appearing men had already exceeded that of the plainclothes officers. The comrades hidden in the white van and the Santana also joined the fight, but there were still some suspicious men who slipped through the net and into the inner cordon. Two of them quickly reached within 3 meters of Han Xiaohong, but they still couldn't get close to her because a man as strong as an iron tower suddenly flashed out from beside the woman. His fists, like hammers, struck the ribs and jaws of the 2 thin men respectively. The thin men couldn't even make a sound before they collapsed to the ground. This iron tower-like man was naturally Xiong Yuan, who was closely guarding Han Xiaohong. Xiong Yuan, realizing the sudden change and the complicated situation, did not hold back. With one move, he directly knocked the thin man approaching Han Xiaohong unconscious. The 3 thin men who arrived later were clearly intimidated by this scene. They stopped about 5 or 6 meters away, not daring to move forward, but also not leaving. Their faces were filled with confusion. Xiong Yuan did not attack, but tightly guarded Han Xiaohong, staring intently at the 3 men. Whoever tried to get closer would inevitably receive a heavy blow from his iron fist. Luo Fei, at the hotel window, quietly cheered for Xiong Yuan. Indeed, with Xiong Yuan's mighty and imposing presence, even 10 more men would not be able to get close to Han Xiaohong. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. The irrelevant onlookers on the square only just came to their senses. The timid ones screamed and scattered, while the bold ones watched from a distance. The situation on the scene became even more chaotic. However, Han Hao's mood had steadied down at this moment. Xiong Yuan had already stabilized the situation. The remaining men did not dare to rush forward anymore. His plainclothes officers would soon be free to help, and then, with everyone working together, none of these men would escape. Sure enough, a plainclothes officer wearing a black hat was already walking towards the core of the cordon. He was on Xiong Yuan's backside, close to the BMW, which was a relatively safe position. Then he waved at Han Xiaohong. Han Xiaohong had already been scared into a trembling mess and immediately ran towards that tall and strong plainclothes officer. In the center of the square, the 3 suspicious men still stood there, dazed. With Xiong Yuan in between, they naturally did not dare to chase after Han Xiaohong. Han Xiaohong's legs had gone weak. The tall plainclothes officer took a few steps forward and then guided him towards the BMW. Seeing that Han Xiaohong had completely lost his composure, the officer quickly reminded him to open the car door. Han Xiaohong fumbled with the remote control, taking several attempts before finally unlocking the door. The officer helped him into the driver's seat and then took the remote control, relocking the car door. Han Hao and the others, watching from a higher vantage point, finally felt their hearts truly settle. The safety features of Han Xiaohong's car were reliable. Even if more suspicious men appeared, it would be difficult for them to harm Han Xiaohong inside the car in a short time. At this moment, more plainclothes officers successively subdued their targets and rushed to the cordon, reinforcing the 3 men who were stunned in the center of the circle. They were quickly brought under control. Only then did Xiong Yuan turn and walk towards the BMW. On the outskirts of the square, not far from the BMW, a man had just stepped out of a taxi. His appearance was similar to the earlier thin men. For some unknown reason, his actions were much slower. Now, He could only stand dazedly by the car door, unsure what to do next. Episode 27 of The Dark One, the end of Han Xiaoong. As Han Xiaoong was leaving work and walking through the square once again, something strange happened. Men with similar basic characteristics kept getting out of taxis around the square. These characteristics matched those that the police had deduced in the Zheng Haoming case. The murderer's basic features were getting closer and closer to Han Xiaoong. Fortunately, a plainclothes officer escorted Han Xiaoong into the BMW. However, this officer seemed a bit odd. The plainclothes officer guarding the BMW suddenly started shouting, "Police!" Then, the officer flipped over the parking lot's wall and lunged towards the dazed man. The man was clearly terrified and ran away. The plainclothes officer's wall flipping delayed him, and he was soon tens of meters behind the suspect. But his running speed was swift, as if he were flying. Han Hao, watching this scene on the monitor, couldn't help but turn to Yin Jian and ask, "Yin Jian, which one of your guys is running so fast?" Yin Jian shook his head in confusion, unable to recognize the officer. To avoid arousing the suspect's suspicion, many plainclothes officers had changed their clothes and pants when they returned to their posts in the afternoon. It was impossible to tell who they were just from a hat. Liu Ofei's attention was also drawn to this plainclothes officer until the latter chased the suspect out of everyone's sight. Then he shifted his gaze back to the square, scanned it, and his expression turned to one of astonishment. "Strange," he muttered. "That doesn't seem to be one of yours. All 13 of your plainclothes officers are still in the square. So who is that guy?" Liu Ofei's tone became tense. Han Hao also realized something and quickly picked up the microphone. "This is 001. Immediately check if the target is safe. Immediately check if the target is safe." At that moment, Xiong Yuan had already arrived at the BMW. He knocked on the car door, but Han Xiaoong inside showed no reaction. Xiong Yuan felt something was wrong. He pressed his face against the car window and peered inside. Soon, his expression froze into a solid stone. Han Xiaoong was slumped over the steering wheel, his head tilted to one side, with a large amount of blood flowing from his neck, staining the right side of his clothes. His right hand hung down, guiding the blood to drip onto the white leather steering wheel, making it look alarmingly red. Half a year ago, when he sat in the driver's seat and shifted this gear, could he have ever imagined his fate today? Since the BMW's keys were taken away, the police had to break the window to open the car door and confirm Han Xiaoong's death. The forensic doctor quickly arrived at the scene and conducted an examination of the body. The members of the special task force in the police station were solemn and silent. Han Hao broke the silence and said, "Everyone, pull yourselves together. This is not acceptable. Yin Jian, you tell everyone what happened." The forensic doctor preliminarily determined that Han Xiaoong had an 8-centimeter long, 1.5 centimeter deep wound on his throat. The wound was very neat, likely caused by a sharp blade. This cut severed Han Xiaohong's trachea and major arteries, causing acute hemorrhagic shock and directly leading to his death. As for the murderer, as we all saw, it was that tall man with a black hat who ran extremely fast but turned out to be a fake police officer. The surveillance footage recorded the entire process from his appearance, the murder, to his successful escape. "Please look at the big screen," Yin Jian continued. At 16 hours, 2 minutes and 23 seconds, Han Xiaoong and Captain Xiong Yuan walked out of the DE building. At 16 hours, 2 minutes and 33 seconds, the first thin man got out of taxi. At 16 hours, 2 minutes and 35 seconds, our plainclothes officer, disguised as a car watcher, tackled him. From 16 hours, 2 minutes and 35 seconds to 16 hours, 2 minutes and 38 seconds, many thin men flooded into the square, and our people couldn't handle them all. Look at 16 hours, 2 minutes and 39 seconds. The murderer with a black hat entered the surveillance frame from the south side of the parking lot. Since our on-site personnel were busy dealing with the thin men running towards Han Xiaohong, no one noticed him. Then, at 16 hours, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, Captain Xiong Yuan knocked down the 2 thin men charging at him and confronted the remaining 3 thin men. At 16 hours, 2 minutes and 42 seconds, The murderer with a black hat walked behind Captain Xiong Yuan and waved at Han Xiaohong. The extremely panicked Han Xiaohong immediately ran towards him. At 16 hours, 2 minutes, and 43 seconds, the man with the black hat helped Han Xiaohong get into the BMW. At 16 hours, 2 minutes, and 47 seconds, the man with the black hat helped Han Xiaohong sit in the driver's seat of the BMW and immediately locked the door. His murder process was very short and was blocked by the car, so the surveillance camera didn't capture it. At 16 hours, 2 minutes, and 50 seconds, our people assisted Captain Xiong Yuan in subduing the last 3 thin men in the square. Captain Xiong Yuan walked towards the BMW. At 16 hours, 2 minutes, and 51 seconds, the man with the black hat flipped over the parking lot's fence, chased the suspicious man, and quickly disappeared from the surveillance frame. Throughout the entire process, because the man with the black hat had his brim pressed very low and his jacket collar pulled very high, no one at the scene, including our technical personnel, could know his real facial features. Yin Jian concluded his report. After Yin Jian's report, everyone present felt extremely heavy-hearted. Han Hao's face was particularly gloomy and terrifying. The criminal police and special police teams had deployed dozens of officers, with the captain himself taking the lead, and had set up what seemed to be an impenetrable trap in such a small area. Yet, the murderer still came and went as he pleased, killing Han Xiaohong as scheduled. Inside the BMW, the police lost their protected target, but only managed to capture 18 suspicious men who appeared out of nowhere. The first man tackled and captured by the police was named AI Yinshan. His account of the incident made Han Hao and others feel increasingly furious and humiliated. AI Yinshan, 25 years old, is a migrant worker who has been working as a prep cook in a local restaurant. About 2 weeks ago, he happened to see a small advertisement posted on the street. A large entertainment center was recruiting male PR agents with attractive salaries, claiming a monthly income of over 10,000 yuan. Such a high salary was naturally a great temptation. Moreover, the physical requirements for applicants made AI Yinshan feel that this was an opportunity he couldn't miss. The advertisement required applicants to be around 165 centimeters tall and have a thin build, which he perfectly matched. AI Yinshan called the number listed in the advertisement. The man who answered the phone told him that the so-called PR agent was supposed to provide sexual services to wealthy women. The reason for the physical requirements was that the entertainment center had a special guest who wanted to find some thin men to accompany him in special games. Hearing that he would have to provide special services, AI Yinshan was initially hesitant. However, the man quickly sent him a photo of the female guest over the internet. To his surprise, she was an extremely beautiful woman. AI Yinshan's primal desires were instantly ignited, and he sent his photo to the man as required. The man was very satisfied with the photo and immediately transferred 1,000 yuan to AI Yinshan's bank account as an advance payment. After receiving the advance payment, AI Yinshan no longer doubted the authenticity of this special recruitment. He purchased gauze, a whip, a rubber simulated knife, and other tools as instructed, then eagerly awaited the call from the beautiful client. Yesterday afternoon, AI Yinshan finally received another call from the man, who said there would be business the next day. Since such transactions were illegal, and the female client was of high status, they had to arrange a special and secretive way to meet. The man sent AI Yinshan a photo of the BMW the client would be driving and told him that the client would leave work around 4 p.m. He was instructed to wait near the square outside the DE building. Once the client exited the building, he was to follow her and get into the car with her. At 3:45 p.m. that day, AI Yinshan arrived at the DE building by taxi and waited impatiently at the designated spot for the beautiful client to appear. After 4 p.m., the woman in the photo, Han Xiaohong, finally walked out of the building, and AI Yinshan quickly received the order to get out of the car. In a hurry to not let the client be taken by other competitors, he rushed towards Han Xiaohong, but was tackled to the cold ground by plainclothes police officers after just a few steps. Even when being questioned and having his statement taken, AI Yinshan still looked puzzled, thinking he was arrested for engaging in an illegal sexual transaction. The experiences of the other apprehended men were similar to AI Yunchan's. It was clear that the mysterious person who had posted the recruitment ad and later contacted the man via phone was the mastermind behind this conspiracy and also the murderer of Han Xiaoang. Although he never showed his face, he had successfully manipulated nearly 20 men driven by greed, turning them into puppets on a string. With extremely precise instructions on time and location, these men stormed into the DE Square, disrupting the police's tight ambush. The mysterious figure then took advantage of the chaos, disguised as a plainclothes officer, and carried out the murder plan. As dusk fell and the sky grew darker, the square was cordoned off, with unrelated onlookers kept outside the perimeter. In front of the BMW, more than 10 policemen with somber expressions stood in a group, while behind them squatted a group of thin men with bruised and swollen faces. The scene was hard to tell whether it was solemn or absurd. As the autumn breeze of dusk gradually picked up, a deep chill spread through everyone's hearts. Episode 28 of The Dark One. The exposure of the secret investigation. The mysterious figure, through a ruse, silently murdered Han Xiaohong without the knowledge of any of the criminal police officers. The suspicious thin men turned out to be mere pawns of the mysterious figure. The entire special task force was plunged into anger and humiliation. At 22:15 on October 23rd, deep into the night, the conference room of the provincial city's criminal police brigade was brightly lit. The members of the 418 Special Task Force had gathered here. Unlike the tense and hurried atmosphere of previous meetings, the venue was now eerily silent. Having just experienced a humiliating failure, even these top-notch elite officers could not help but fall into a state of depression and confusion. The police investigators analyzed all possible escape routes for the murderer and, with the DE building as the center, launched a meticulous search of the area. However, they failed to obtain any valuable clues. It seemed that once the murderer escaped from the police control district, he vanished without a trace. Whether the murderer hid nearby, fled by car, or disguised himself and blended into the crowd, everything remained a mystery. These outcomes did not surprise Han Hao and others. Since the murderer had meticulously planned the entire crime, his escape route was undoubtedly foolproof. It was normal for the police to find no trace. What truly sent a chill down everyone's spine were some other circumstances. The Special Task Force spent several hours repeatedly watching the surveillance footage from the crime scene. They studied the locations where the thin men got out of the vehicles, as well as the times and routes they took to rush into the square. The results were astonishing. When the thin men attacked the police cordon according to these locations, times, and routes, all of the police's forces were instantly pinned down, without exception. The few men who finally broke through into the inner circle all appeared to the northeast of Xiong-Yuan. As a result, Han Xiaohong naturally took cover behind Xiong-Yuan, while the murderer entered the square from the southwest, successfully luring Han Xiaohong to his side. None of this was a coincidence, but rather the result of the murderer's brilliant on-site arrangement and command. All of the police's weak points were mercilessly exploited by him. The seemingly impregnable defense crumbled like an anthill. The men controlled by the murderer all had similar characteristics. They were thin and had their left hands wrapped in bandages. The police had previously concluded from the investigation of the crime scene that the murderer was around 165 centimeters tall and had an injured hand. Apparently, this conclusion was also a deliberate illusion created by the murderer for the police. Faced with this reality, even the usually proud Han Hao had to admit, so far, all our moves have been under the murderer's control. We've been following his script. What are your thoughts on this? If I had stayed close to Han Xiaohong, the murderer wouldn't have succeeded, Xiong-Yuan said, feeling responsible. Captain Xiong, this isn't your fault. With so many suspicious men breaking through the cordon, you did a good job. My team members were all plainclothes officers on the scene. It's impossible for you to distinguish them clearly. So, that guy found a loophole, Han Hao replied, taking responsibility. Yin Jian, who admired Han Hao's willingness to take responsibility, thought to himself, "This is indeed a quality a leader must have. As his deputy, I should find something to learn from in every little detail." Suddenly, Zheng Rihua, with a smirk, made a seemingly contradictory statement. "This guy's methods are really skillful, but the more skillful they are, the easier it is to expose flaws." "What do you mean by that?" someone asked. "Elaborate a bit. Everyone knows the murderer is a formidable character. He is proficient in criminal investigation, familiar with police deployment tactics, good at hand-to-hand combat, and can even handle a computer. Is it possible for such a person to just appear out of nowhere? There must be records. He must have received formal training. We can investigate relevant personnel. I'll take on this task," Zheng Rihua continued. "In my computer database, I have the records of all personnel who have received military or police training over the past 20 years, he added. "Good. That's a good idea," Han Hao said, though his eyes showed some dissatisfaction. He really disliked Zheng Rihua's habit of speaking in half sentences and deliberately creating suspense. Since the meeting began, Luo Fei had been sitting quietly, seemingly preoccupied. At this moment, he suddenly looked up, his gaze fixed on Zheng Rihua. "Have you already started your work?" he asked. "What do you mean?" Zheng Rihua replied. "Why did you go to my room?" Luo Fei pressed. "Go to your room? Have I been to your room?" Zheng Rihua feigned ignorance. "You didn't go to the scene today, but you entered my room and went through my things, didn't you?" Luo Fei accused. Zheng Rihua was taken aback. Indeed, he had secretly entered Luo Fei's room to investigate him and look for any suspicious recordings, although he thought he had been discreet and left no trace. Luo Fei's certainty made him stop denying it and instead tried to joke his way out. Just joking with Officer Luo. What can't you see, Officer Luo? Zheng Rihua said, trying to lighten the mood. Joking is fine, but Longzhou Net detected an attack on the Longzhou Telecom database this afternoon. Someone retrieved my phone call records for the past month. My colleagues traced the attack, Luo Fei said, not buying the joke. Officer Zheng, are you also joking? Zheng Rihua's face turned red with embarrassment. Han Hao and Yin Jian, who were aware of the situation, remained silent. Xiong Yuan was surprised, while Mu Jianyun, after a moment of thought, stepped in to mediate. Luo Fei also turned to Mu Jianyun, his expression serious. Maybe this is all a misunderstanding. Let's talk about it privately later. It's not a misunderstanding, Luo Fei insisted. Officer Mu, aren't you also investigating me? Luo Fei continued. If that's the case, then this is about the case and should be discussed in the meeting, Mu Jianyun replied, feeling a flush of embarrassment under Luo Fei's intense gaze and involuntarily averting her eyes. At this point, as the head of the special task force, Han Hao had to intervene. Officer Luo, I arranged for them to investigate you because you're not a member of the provincial city police force. When the case happened, you suddenly appeared and are closely related to the blood case from 18 years ago. As the person in charge of the case, I can't avoid some work and hope you understand and cooperate. Is it because I offended the glory of the criminal police captain the first time we met? Is it because I hit the man you sent to tail me? Luo Fei asked. What have you found out? Han Hao continued. All right, let me go deeper. Was it you who first proposed the false information about the murderer being 165 centimeters tall and having an injured hand? Did you really draw that conclusion from the crime scene in such a short time? The details of the police deployment in DE Square were known only to the officers on the scene. Yet the first thing you did when you arrived at the monitoring room was to identify all the plainclothes officers. Were you just showing off your criminal investigation knowledge? Han Hao's implication was clear. He was openly accusing Luo Fei of colluding with the murderer. The two men glared at each other, and the atmosphere was tense. At this moment, Xiong Yuan, with his robust physique and powerful voice, shouted to calm the situation. His voice resonated, making everyone's eardrums buzz. Captain Han, Officer Luo, please control your emotions, he said firmly. Luo Fei realized he had lost his composure and tried to regain his focus. Meanwhile, he overheard Zheng Rihua muttering to himself. Yeah, How did that guy know the details of the police deployment? That is strange. Ah, the hotel. Luo Fei suddenly realized and shared his theory. His tone and demeanor indicated a new discovery. Everyone quickly turned their attention to him, and even Han Hao forgot his previous displeasure. What do you mean? Someone asked. To understand the police deployment details, one must be able to observe the entire square. Therefore, the murderer must have also monitored that square. He needed a vantage point. Where'd he go to find a hidden vantage point? Luo Fei left the sentence unfinished, but everyone already knew the answer. The hotel room opposite the DE building. Since this was the best monitoring point chosen by the police, it was undoubtedly also the best monitoring point the murderer could choose.